My name is Lolo Puzzlo, and this is Media Delta. All right. So we got a first. Well, let me back up. We have done a couple of tokusatsu shows in the past. We have done a more traditional toku show, and then that was Tokyo Shirei Soul Brain. And we have also done a not sort of traditional, but still technically toku show in the form of Sukuban Deka. Well, it's about time for us to get to an actual mainline one. Although technically, you could argue we did Ultraman, although that was very much a spin-off. This is not a true, or that was not a true Toei Toku experience. Which this is our first. Well, our first entry of us looking at one of the mainline ones, which, what would you consider, was it Ultraman, Sentai, Kamen Rider?
That's the big three.
The big three there. We are now stumbling into our first foray into Kamen Rider, which is Japanese for just Masked Rider. It is a series that has been around since 1971. That is about, basically it's about two things. It's a guy in a costume that's usually, like, each season there's a lot of seasons, has a theme to it. A number of them, probably the most famous ones, are ones that are kind of, they look like, what are they, grasshoppers or the mantis?
Yes, grasshoppers.
Grasshopper, because the original was.
Yeah, there's it's grasshopper themed, and also there's sometimes, depending upon how Japanese culture and Toei wants to handle motorcycles, there's usually a motorcycle involved, at least early on.
At least one episode has the bike.
Yeah, but whether or not it stays is another question. But yeah, we are watching Kamen Rider Black, which is technically the 8th Kamen Rider series, but this was after a 5 or 6 year hiatus between the last one, and it is also a Kamen Rider that is it is its own story. It has no callbacks to the previous Kamen Riders, so it is a good way to kind of start fresh. And yeah, it is also one of the more famous ones, I believe. Maybe it's kind of pseudo-sequel. Kamen Rider, was it Black RX?
Yeah, Black RX.
It's also pretty well known. But it is one of the more notable series, and we have actually taken a look at a game based off of it that was contemporary at the time. That was Kamen Rider Black for the Famicom Disk System, a notably terrible game. But we'll see whether or not at least we'll talk about whether or not our first part of our look at Kamen Rider Black is better than the Famicom Disk System game, which damn near anything would be. But we'll talk about what our experiences are with the first 7 episodes of Kamen Rider Black. And by we, I mean I'm not the only one who watched this, so please introduce yourselves. Other people who have already talked, actually.
Hi, I'm Carnival. Let's do this in one shot.
Hi, I'm Torpid Typist, and damn if those aren't some effects.
Yeah. So this was 1987 when this came out. They're still making Kamen Rider shows. It's actually interesting because this is, I think, a relative first, is that actually, I shouldn't say we are associated, but most of us are familiar with a Kamen Rider series or two. Some of us a lot more than that. So we're going into this a little bit knowledgeable of how Kamen Rider tends to be, although most of our experiences was with later ones. But we will be talking about this 1987 one. But before I get to you two in one-to-one conversations, let me kind of give my own thoughts on what I've seen from what we've seen of the first 7 episodes of Kamen Rider Black. I am enjoying this. I'm actually enjoying this a little bit better than we did. Just to give it a comparison point to Soul Brain and Sukuban Deka. This one is a little bit. I don't know if I'd say it is. It has more of a through line of the story. Kind of. It seems like it is. It's kind of progressing from episode to episode. Sukuban Deka kind of had that as well, but I do believe that this one is more, you're meant to watch this in order. Although you can kind of skip around with this, but I think you're meant to watch this in order. And from what I've seen, I've really just been enjoying it. The as Torpo kind of alluded to, the effects in this show, like I have, because I'm trying to think of the ones I've seen. I've seen Revice, I've seen O's, seen a little bit of Double, and so it's mostly stuff that's from the new, like it's from the Heisei era. And this is a Showa era Kamen Rider, which means that the effects are even cheaper than they are in newer stuff. It's actually kind of funny that we watch this kind of going off of Clash of the Titans, because it has that same kind of problem where the effects are very cheesy for this, and it has a lot of giggle factor to it. But I mean, if you can get away, like if you can kind of shut your mind off to the kind of the cheapness of the effects, it's still an enjoyable show. It can be kind of goofy at times, but for the most part, it gets the job done of being, hey, here's this guy who can turn into a superhero that can fight mutants and all that. And the villains kind of seem, I don't know if, but the villains I found to be interesting. Like, it does a good job at pretty much anything it's trying to do. Outside of the cheesiness, the plots can be a little weird, but for the most, I mean, that kind of adds to the charm. This is not like super deep story wise. It's a show about a dude who you get the rider kick in this. You have the motorcycle, you get the battle hopper, and the episodes are just like, it's a fun show. There's nothing really super noteworthy, I'd say. It's just a very solid show. And for that, I am kind of thinking that I'm going to give this a I am probably going to give this something in the 7 range. Well, I'm going to give it. Right now, my thoughts is I'm thinking that this is going to be a 7 because I think it's a little bit better than the Toku stuff we've seen before, but I think it is a pretty solid show going on to like really good. Anyway, why don't we talk to Torpo about what his thoughts are on Kamen Rider Black?
Hello.
So, like I said, I think that actually our watching of Kamen Rider is pretty much identical. Because outside of you've not seen, because what Kamen Riders have you seen?
Pretty much the ones you've seen, which are O's and Revice.
Revice, a little bit of Double.
A little bit of Double, yeah.
Yeah, so we're mostly watching. We're pretty much the same in that. And yeah, a lot of our stuff is with the newer stuff, like the Heisei era stuff.
Yeah, it's really weird looking back now and seeing where they've come from.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of a little bit like you can kind of see the elements are definitely there, but it's like when we're watching Clash of the Titans. Like, it's stuff that when it was new, it probably was very technically advanced, but it looks goofy. I just cut around, like cut to the chase. It looks goofy. But I mean, that's also part of the charm.
That's part of the charm is I enjoy the schlock. Like, later seasons, I would argue, are much tighter in more consistently written. But there's a certain degree of charm to this old, like, schlocky style.
Yeah.
Also, like, some of the fights were actually fun. Because it's not as much effects, it's just people beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah. So before we get into more detailed discussion, what are your kind of your first impressions just from your gut? Like, doesn't have to be like super intricate.
I found it fun. Was it good? It was all right. I wouldn't call it good or great, but it was fun. It doesn't help that I've had my perception, I guess, colored by more recent series, which do the premise better. But I thought it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
If a bit schlocky and pretty dated.
Yeah. So, anything that you want to, or like, what are like 3 things that you found, like, or up to 3 things that you found notable about from what you've seen?
3 things I found notable. Once again, action is the core of Kamen Rider, on top of, as Carnival will later put it, I'm sure, cheapness.
Yes.
But it was fun seeing the actors beat the shit out of each other.
Yeah, because that's a thing that is just based on conversations that at Carnival. And I'm sure we'll discuss it a little bit when we just kind of get in as a group. But apparently, safety standards were not up to
No,
yeah.
they sure weren't.
There's a lot of explosions that happen in incredible close proximity to the suit actors.
On people too.
Yeah,
People have pyrotechnics go off on their bodies.
Yeah, they don't mess around.
It's incredible. It's so, but there's you could almost say that there's a certain charm in that because you can't see that anymore. Not that you should, because it's dangerous as fuck, and people probably got quite injured. But it's one of those things you can appreciate looking back now.
Yeah, especially because it's like now, like when explosions happen, you can tell that they're mostly CG, which I mean is much safer. It can look a little weird, but for the most part, it's at least not a guy having a firework go off on his person,
on his fucking suit. Yeah, because it is important to note there are different actors in the suit than are the face.
Yes. The same guy who is in the suit of Kamen Rider Black is the same one he's been in like 20 of these things.
Most of them. They go through I don't know if they did at the time, but they go through the same agency for all their stunt actors and their suit actors. And it's pretty neat. And being a suit actor is consistent work. And like I got nothing but respect for the people in those suits because that is some hard fucking work.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what the guy's name was. Kamen Rider Wiki's a little weird, but
an important thing to note about these sorts of suit shows is that there are different people in the suit than are the face.
Yes, I'm trying to find the. Go ahead.
A minor thing that I appreciated looking towards future series is how simple and relatively quiet the suit and the change were.
Yes. The only thing that is a little that we'll have to make a note for, the transformation sequence can be a little photosensitive.
Yeah, they're slashing. Just remember, Porygon died for our sins.
Yeah. Also, for the record of what I was actually looking for, Jiro Okamoto is the person who has been in the Kamen Rider suit. Actually, this was his first one. And he has gone on to basically be the suit actor. This was 1987. The last time that he was in a Kamen Rider suit was 2021. He was in Kamen Rider Buster in Kamen Rider Saber.
Yeah. No, it's consistent work. And the work environment has gotten better over time, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Rather than throwing people into a meat grinder. But yeah, so I like the action. It's pretty fun. Some of the stunts are a bit goofy. Oftentimes they're goofy, especially the further you go back. But I still think the action is, well, one of the big reasons to watch Kamen Rider, really.
Yes. One other thing that, just to tie it into something that we've already watched, he was also a suit actor in Tokyo Shiri Soulbrain. He was Nightfire, so he was the Red. He was a suit actor for the main guy.
Yeah, no, that's because Toei goes through the same agency, and
yep,
you want people who are good at what they're doing.
Yep.
But yeah, so there was that. As I mentioned, I actually quite like the suit. It is one of the more quintessential Kamen Rider designs. Nobody remembers the original suit because it's bad, but black is what people usually think of.
Yes. This was like I mentioned in the intro. It's after a hiatus of shows, and they definitely. I have not seen the series that occurred directly before this, but from what I've seen of older Kamen Riders, and by that I mean the first episode of the first series. There's been a gap in terms of
you posted that GIF on Twitter. It was real good. Yeah. So one last thing I would like to mention is the effects. I mentioned it briefly before, but yeah, they're not good. But it's important to note that Toei makes shit on the cheap, but more importantly, they have a 1 week turnaround,
Yep.
which is insane. Like working on Kamen Rider is grueling work.
Yep.
But it's still really goofy seeing these people on a green screen superimposed on another shot, moving around, whooshing.
It's the same thing as Clash of the Titans. It's like the green screening. It is definitely because the grading for like the camera, like the photo, like the actual cinematography for the person who is in front of the green screen and the cinematography of the green screen are two different qualities, and it is very notable.
Yep. It's kind of ridiculous, but as I'm sure Carnival will say, cheapness is the essence of Toku.
Yes.
Don't tell him I said that.
I'm sure he's gonna say it, but
no. I said he would say it. It's fine. He doesn't need to know.
We'll see.
Either way, I think that's the three things I can think of.
Yeah. All right. Well, from what you've seen already, what is your number scale for this one?
I mean, I would put it about on par with Soul Brain.
So you're thinking 9?
Yeah, 9 or 10, but
okay,
it's a comfortable 9 at least.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, let's in fact see what our resident Toku expert has to say about Kamen Rider Black.
Hello.
Hello. So what is your familiarity with Kamen Rider?
I'm very familiar. I'm glad you asked, you see. But all seriousness, I've been a big fan of Super Sentai, Power Rangers, and just the general ilk for a long time, because I usually remember, as I mentioned previously, watching the original Ultraman with my dad on some VHSs he's had. So only relatively recently, like 2016, the year Kamen Rider XA was airing, was the year I was able to like start actually watching Kamen Riders regularly. So I'm pretty familiar with the series as much as a person who can't speak Japanese has access to the shows.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that you've essentially been our kind of link into the Kamen Rider stuff. So yeah. So Jargist, you are pretty much our expert on this. So since you are a Toku expert and you actually you had not seen this series in particular, correct?
No, I had known of it because again, it's one of the ones that people mention, especially of the Showa era writers, is one of the ones they say is one of the better ones to watch. But this is the first time I've actually sat down and actually started watching it.
Yeah. So with that, what's your kind of general impressions of your first impressions for Kamen Rider Black?
It's solid. It's not bad, but it hasn't had things that it specifically stand out to me super strong, which is kind of unfair to it to a degree, just because of like these shows run for 45 to 50 episodes on average. So we are 7 episodes in, so some of the really wild shit just probably hasn't had a chance to pop off yet. But it's a solid start. It's nothing. It hasn't been super memorable to me in terms of like its start compared to some of the other series, but like we're 7 episodes in. It's kind of unfair.
Yeah. So with that, what are like up to 3 things that you kind of thought were notable from what we saw?
I'm sure the Torbert's already mentioned this, but hey, it's nice actually seeing the bike get used regularly compared to modern riders where it's 1 episode and then gone because Tokyo's bike laws are really kind of strict, and so they don't get to use the bike all that often. Another thing is that I'm glad to see that they've never been good, even in the past, they've never been good with compositing special effects into the shots.
Yeah, that is something that like we were talking about how it is the same problem that we had or that Clash of Titans had where like I guess at the time it would be really hard to do the same level of grading to like especially green screen shots. The footage that's on the green screen is a entirely different quality it's almost like it is a VHS camera doing the green screen shot with film grade like footage for the person that is in front of the green screen. It is very jarring.
I wouldn't be shocked if that was absolutely it, because also these shows were filmed on a weekly basis. So they didn't have a super amount of time to like do a bunch of post production that would be necessary to really make it clean anyway. So we're done. We filmed everything. This goes to the editor, and we got to start filming the next week's episode.
Yeah. Anything else you thought was notable?
I also just knowing the safety concerns that happened because their shows are much safer currently than they are in this era. Just I look at some of these stunts and I'm kind of just like, oh man, this is worrying, because like you can see when they do some of those explosions that are like, no, that's not in post. Those are actual explosions right next to these people. That flamethrower one was also another one of like, oh man, please, are these? I know these people are okay, but I hope no one got really injured from this.
Yeah, that was a thing we talked about. Torpo is it is the fact that like there was those were fireworks on those actual people. That it's a little cringy. Well, like not cringy, but it is cringe-inducing in the like painful sense of the word. So yeah. So I guess with that, without just kind of going into or like just kind of giving off the cuff, what is your ranking for this?
7 or 8. Like,
All right.
I like it better than the other two things in the Toku block, but like there are series that are much stronger than both that we've seen here on Media Delta and in just Kamen Rider in general that I think are much stronger series to watch.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess with that, let's go ahead and have our little group discussion on what we thought as a group about Kamen Rider Black. So, now that we're all as a group, we can kind of talk about a little bit more of the overarching things that are like the overarching concepts from what we saw of the show. Let's start with storytelling. So, stuff like characters, plot, themes, dialogue. I like this Kamen Rider's writer. Kotaro is a good writer, or it's like he's a good the person that's not behind the suit, but the person that is the Kamen Rider, I guess.
I think he's a good character, but I think he's just a bit too understated for me. But that's probably just a result of changing a writing taste between the years.
Yeah, because it's like
the series has gotten a bit more, I guess let's say extreme over time.
I think
more over the top, I should say.
Yeah, because I think like the thing with especially with him being a motorcycle guy, I think they kind of are going for a little bit more of a like not like a biker, but like someone who is like around motorcycles a lot. Whereas something like you see like in more recent ones where they can't use the bike as often, you get a little bit more diverse character in terms of the writer. Because it's like, well, they could be in more like interest, or they can be in more diverse situations. Like just thinking of like from what we've seen of like O's and Revice, where it's like, because what Revice, he's like what he's like he works for his family's bathhouse.
Yes.
So he's like he can be a little bit more goofy in that, and like Double's protagonist being like the kind of the detective with a little bit of goofiness to him,
who thinks he's way cooler than he is.
Yeah. So if you're more recent or like more like familiar with modern stuff, it's going to come off as kind of a little like I can definitely see where you can kind of a little bit underbaked. But I feel like that's going for like for what they're going for in this show is I feel like they're going for a little bit more of a particular archetype that fits with the bike.
Yeah, it's a more grounded show. It's definitely more grounded show than some of the other stuff. Even like the original Kamen Rider Amazon, in which the main character was a child that was abandoned in the Amazon rainforest and found a magic amulet, and then came around to start ripping the monsters apart into horrifying blood splatters. So, yeah, this is definitely one of the more grounded series.
It is more understated, yeah, but I would argue that's just a consequence of being a show that's run 50 fucking years.
Yeah. Well,
it's 50 years this year.
Yeah.
Revice was the 50th anniversary show. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, it'll be last year actually, but point being, yeah, 50 years. There's drift.
Yeah, this is like from the second decade this show has been around. It's not as but I still think for the most part, like the characters seem to be all right. The only thing is like the villains are like, I mean, they're good for being villains, but they kind of, I feel like we haven't seen a whole lot of them yet.
Well, the
There
problem
was
is
zero depth to them. Yeah, they're just villains, and that's it.
that, and also they're Sentai villains effectively. Because the way they handle this is that they send the monster of the week each week while they sit in their throne room, compared to say, which is much more, well, I won't say much more. It is how Sentai villains work until like the last quarter of the show. Like good Sentais are better about making them feel like they have more of a presence, but
unlike Sentai, and it's an important feeling I say that is in Kamen Rider, is the sense of progress. Like things are happening and moving.
yes.
In this, while not quite as much as say some of the later shows, it still has that feeling. Like things are a consequence of things that came before them.
Yeah, because one of the ways that we've shown is that Kataro's going through his memory of the boat ride he had before he got kidnapped and transformed, is going through what he remembers of these people that were on the boat with his family to try and get back to finding the evil cult. And we see how they're either various members of the cult are being dealt with as they either fail or Kotaro gets closer to finding them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not the best, but it feels like things are happening.
Yes.
And like the plots of these episodes for the most part have been pretty good from what I've seen. Like I don't think they've been bad. They're like the goat cult leader one was kind of fun.
Yeah.
They've been good from what I've seen of Kamen Rider. Like I don't know if I'd say they're spectacular, but they're definitely good.
Yeah, I think they're fair. They're all solid. Like the goat cult has been the standout one, but that was just because that episode was a massive change in tone from everything else.
Yeah. Also, the one where the guy was forced to get injected with steroids to be the best racer was also certainly one.
Look, man, it's Japan. They can't give on that they know too much about drugs.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I guess with kind of storytelling out of the way, unless anyone else had any other things they wanted to mention, we can move on to the aesthetic part of it. So the art, the music, set design. I think we've gone over quite a bit that it is quite the goofy looking show sometimes. But I think for the most part, like the actual designs, I think are pretty good.
Toei's always been pretty good about suit design, honestly.
Yes.
I will say I do like this Kamen Rider design more than a number of others, and this is what I think of as like the quintessential Kamen Rider design.
You mean you don't like a belt? You like a belt that isn't screaming at you for a good 10 seconds?
They don't shut the fuck up. It's so bad.
Yeah. It's like, especially at the later episodes of Revice, when you have two Kamen Riders fighting each other, where it just sounds like someone's pushing on a soundboard over and over again.
Like it was borderline blowing the audio out too. Yeah. Like the quality of the sample they use is so bad.
Which is weird because it's like Bandai has the master samples. Why did you not just give them a good one to put in?
But yeah, this one is much more, I would say, it's much more down to earth. Like, if you think of like a Kamen Rider, this is again probably a quintessential one. Monster designs they're monster designs. Some of them are a little. It's the kind of the thing where you're going for a little bit more abstract, where it's just it's like a bunch of rubber. Like the goat one stood out in particular. Like was it a bird one? That was also kind of interesting.
Right.
But for the most part, like if you've seen a Sentai monster, it's par for the course.
I mean, okay, Sentai is usually a bit more colorful.
Yeah, well,
I will say I would argue there's like a little more detail though to the Kamen Rider ones.
Yeah, yes. From what I've seen, it's like it's a lot more. Well, from where I was going, it's more gray. Like these one are a lot more earthy to say in
gray
terms of
and
design.
brown.
You're gray, you're brown. They're detailed, but they're also very earthy.
They definitely get better about that as time went on.
Yeah. And then like everything, like the only thing, as we kind of mentioned, is the only thing that looks a little goofy is when they need special effects. But that's kind of what you have to work with. I don't think. Yeah.
1 week turnaround, they don't have the ability.
Insane turnaround for what they have to do.
Yeah. And again, as we kind of mentioned, it kind of adds the charm. So I think that's good on the aesthetic. Performance-wise, it didn't think performances have been good. And then I guess we can actually, for this one, kind of talk about the fight scenes. Fight scenes have been pretty good for what we've seen so far.
Yeah, they employ professionals to beat the shit out of each other.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. My only problems with it are more of the just. I'm very much like always afraid of seeing some of the stunts, especially with the explosives and just like, oh god.
I really like holding people over ledges.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be worse. Like, as like little extra bit, we watched some of the first Kamen Rider an episode where they literally fought next to a fucking cliff.
Yeah. Fought next to a cliff. You definitely saw the people rolling down the cliff. But like not like off of it, but got pretty close.
It was fucking terrifying.
But then again, they didn't also see a lot of like impact. They were by it, but also whenever there was an impact, it was like super zoomed in. Which actually, that's kind of almost something that I kind of felt was a little off. Well, one of the few complaints I'd have with this one is the fact that there's a lot of use of stock footage, in particular when they need to do the rider punch and the rider kick, or the rider anything, where they use like a stock thing, and the cuts in it. Actually, we can kind of combine this with the competency bit. Is that there's a lot of cut-in stuff that is the cuts. It could be. It's like, again, it's done in a week, but the cuts are not exactly super smooth.
It is a thing of they get better with compositing as time goes on, but man, it's a bit rough here.
Yeah.
My other favorite is like the kicks that are very obviously not kicks.
Yeah, there's a lot of like landing on people.
And they just splice in the kick footage.
Yeah.
Yep.
But still, it's an entertaining fight.
Yeah.
It gets the job done.
Like,
it's still fun.
The fights here are still better than a lot of Western shows contemporarily made.
It's like, and if thinking of the last Toku thing we saw, which was like Sukuban Deka, where that was like the fights in that were nowhere near as good as the ones that are in this, because those were even barely fights.
So, like, one of the luxuries of having suits in suit actors is that you can hire professionals who know how to fight and make it look good.
Yeah.
Like, there's an entire agency dedicated to that. It's nice. It works.
Yeah, it's absolutely great. It flows well. Like, you can, even when you know it's there, they sell the hits properly.
Also, they know how to fall.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Very important thing.
They know how to take a hit. They know how to get. They know how to take a lot of styrofoam falling on the head.
It's great. It's what happens when you hire professionals.
Yeah, it is. Also, definitely saw some cars blow up, or cars get. Yeah, it is. That also.
It's a weird thing Toei likes is destroying cars, but the bike.
To be fair, the bike is less their fault. Because it's probably very expensive to make have to fix the stuff they add on to the bikes they buy from whatever agency they get, whatever car company they get.
Time consuming.
Yes, time consuming more than probably expensive.
Yeah. Also of note is that we saw the warehouse and the quarry not as much as we saw it in Soulbright.
I mean, I like that the first episode of the OG Toku, like the OG Kamen Rider, opened with the quarry.
Yeah. There's a lot of the quarry in that one.
The quarry has always been there. The quarry has always been with us. Good friend and confidant, the quarry.
Yeah, we only saw it, twice? In this one? Or in this set?
Yeah, it was surprising. The warehouse, though, got a lot of work.
The warehouse got a lot of work.
It earned its paycheck.
So yeah. Kind of it's a decent Kamen Rider.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's fun.
That's the most important thing. Is it's fun, as Kamen Rider should be.
Yeah. I guess actually does.
Oh wait, actually, really quick. That reminds me something that Bag of Magic Food said, which was I told you about the metal hero whose special power is teleporting everyone to the quarry. Friend and foe, there's a lot of really weird cuts. A lot of really weird cuts taking people to the warehouse or the quarry.
Yeah, like the thing is, like, you don't see any like chases in this. Like, it's a lot of they'll start to get a chase and then like
you see like the Kamen Rider tackle the dude into the quarry somehow.
Also the other thing is that there's a lot of like weird cuts where like he'll like go to the bike. It looks like he's summoning the bike to him, but no, he's like he calls out Battle Chopper or Battle Hopper, and then you'll see the bike come, and then he's like on it, and it's a weird temporal gap, but yeah, like you never see him like you'll see him like get on in the middle of something, but you never see him like initially mount the bike.
Yeah.
It's also kind of funny because it's a dirt bike. It is very obviously a dirt bike.
I believe it's like a Suzuki like RH 125, I believe. It is like it is a standard, like it is a Suzuki RA 125 specifically. Which is like these have been around since the 60s apparently. So yeah, though then again they were making them still in the 86. So I guess yeah. You can, if you look at like if you look at the bike, it's like they painted it green and just added some stuff onto it. So yeah, I think. Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
Not I can think of at the
Not
moment.
particularly.
Well, in that case, I think we probably should watch a little bit more. I don't know if we'll watch another full 7, but I think we'll watch some more and we'll kind of get a full take on what we thought and kind of talk about any trivia that we had. Not going to rank it quite yet then, but we kind of have a general idea on what we're going on. So before we head out, Carnival, is there anything you want to plug?
Your local bail, mutual aid, or bail fund.
Torpo.
Twitch.tv/TorpidTypist and at TorpidTypist on Twitter. And I'd like to plug the hole in the bike they made, but the bike did it itself, so whatever.
Yeah, it did in fact plug its own hole. Which was weird. It didn't look great.
It looked weird. It looked so weird.
So yeah, with that, we are going to continue on next episode by talking a little bit more about Kamen Rider Black and finally putting it on the board. So, until then, thank you all for listening. If you would like to see the list in which we have ranked every single thing we've done for Media Delta, you can go to r3.ldp.life in your browser. If you would like to watch the sister show that determines what could show up on Media Delta, that's Retro Rank Rhapsody, you can watch it live on Twitch at twitch.tv/LoloToPuzzlo or on YouTube at youtube.ldp.life. If you would like to discuss this episode with others, please join our Discord server by going to discord.ldp.life in your browser, which should give you a link. Thank you again for listening.